The letter in Miranda Preston's trembling hands bore traces of dust and sweat, but the words inside made her blood run cold as she stood in the tiny post office in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, realizing that someone had read her most intimate thoughts before resealing the envelope with careless haste. It was late September in 1882, and the autumn air carried the promise of an early winter across the Dakota Territory. Miranda had been writing to her cousin in St. Louis for months, sharing details about her life running the general store she had inherited from her father, but more importantly, she had confided her growing concerns about the land grabbers who were systematically forcing homesteaders off their claims. She had documented names, dates, and methods in those letters, thinking they would be safe in the hands of family who might help her expose the corruption. Now, standing in the cramped space that smelled of paper and ink, she understood that her enemies had been reading every word. Her fingers traced the broken seal, and her heart hammered against her ribs. The postmaster, old Henry Wilkins, had already left for the day, but she knew he was not the one who had betrayed her. The interception had happened somewhere along the route, probably in the hands of men who worked for Silas Thornton, the cattle baron who wanted to control every acre between Sioux Falls and the Missouri River. Miranda had been a thorn in his side for months, refusing to sell her property and encouraging others to stand firm against his intimidation tactics. She tucked the letter into her satchel and stepped out onto the wooden sidewalk, her eyes scanning the street for anything unusual. The September sun was sinking low, casting long shadows between the buildings. Horses stood tied to hitching posts, and a wagon rattled past, but everything seemed normal. Too normal, perhaps. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and started walking toward her store, her mind racing with the implications of what she had discovered. Miranda was 23 years old. With dark hair, she kept pinned up in a practical bun and gray eyes that had learned to hide fear behind determination. She had run the general store alone since her father's death 2 years earlier, and she had earned respect in the community for her fair prices and honest dealings. But respect would not protect her if Thornton decided she was too dangerous to leave alone. She was halfway to her store when she noticed the rider coming fast down the main street. The horse was lathered with sweat, its sides heaving, and the man in the saddle sat with the easy grace of someone who had spent his life on horseback. Even from a distance, she recognized Ben Parker, the cowboy who worked on the Morrison Ranch about 15 miles north of town. She had seen him a handful of times over the past year, always polite, always keeping to himself, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested he was more than just another ranch hand. Ben pulled his horse to a sliding stop in front of her, dust billowing around them. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, and his dark eyes were urgent as they met hers. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and the lean, muscular build of a man who worked hard for his living. His dark hair was pushed back under his hat, and there was an intensity in his expression that made her breath catch. "Miss Preston," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I need to talk to you, now." She glanced around at the people on the street, aware that they were drawing attention. "My store is just down the way. We can talk there." He swung down from his horse, moving with a slight wince that suggested he had been riding for hours without rest. He grabbed the reins and walked beside her, leading his tired mount. She could feel the tension radiating from him, and her own anxiety ratcheted higher. "How long have you been riding?" she asked quietly. "Since last night," he said. "I came as fast as I could." Her store stood at the corner of Phillips Avenue and 9th Street, a solid 2-story building with living quarters upstairs. She unlocked the door and ushered him inside, then locked it behind them. The familiar smell of coffee, leather, and dry goods usually comforted her, but today it did nothing to calm her nerves. Ben tied his horse to the post outside and followed her in. Once they were alone among the shelves stocked with flour, sugar, bolts of fabric, and tools, he removed his hat and ran a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "Miss Preston, your letters have been intercepted," he said without preamble. "Thornton's men have been opening them at the way station between here and Yankton. I heard them talking about it last night when I was in town picking up supplies. They know everything you have been writing to your cousin. They know you have been documenting their activities, and they are planning to make an example of you." Miranda felt the blood drain from her face. "I just realized it myself," she whispered, reaching into her satchel to pull out the latest letter. "The seal was broken on this one." "I thought I was being careful." Ben stepped closer, his expression grim. "Careful is not enough when you are dealing with men like Thornton. He has half the territorial government in his pocket, and the other half is too scared to stand against him. I heard them say they are planning to burn you out tomorrow night, make it look like an accident. They want to send a message to anyone else who might think about opposing them." She felt dizzy, and she reached out to steady herself against the counter. Ben's hand shot out to support her elbow, his touch gentle despite the urgency of the situation. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, looking up into his face. "You work for Morrison and he does business with Thornton. This could cost you everything." Ben's jaw tightened. "Morrison is a decent man, but he is too afraid to stand up to Thornton. I have watched what Thornton has been doing for the past year, forcing families off their land, burning crops, running off livestock. I have kept quiet because I needed the work, but I cannot stay silent anymore. Not when I know an innocent woman is going to be hurt." There was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. She had noticed him before, of course. It was hard not to notice a man like Ben Parker, with his quiet strength and the way he always treated people with courtesy. But she had never allowed herself to think beyond those brief encounters. Now, standing close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, she felt a connection that had nothing to do with the danger surrounding them. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "You need to leave town," he said. "Tonight. Go somewhere Thornton cannot reach you, at least until we can figure out a way to expose what he is doing." She shook her head. "This store is all I have. If I leave, he wins. He gets what he wanted all along." "If you stay, you could die," Ben said bluntly. "A store can be rebuilt. Your life cannot." She pulled away from him, pacing between the shelves. Everything her father had built was in this building. Every memory of working beside him, learning the business, earning the trust of their customers. The thought of abandoning it made her feel sick. "There has to be another way," she said. Ben watched her, and she could see him thinking, weighing options. "What if we could get proof of what they are doing? Real proof that could not be ignored, even by the territorial governor?" "How?" "The way station where they are intercepting your letters. If we could catch them in the act, document it somehow, we might have enough evidence to start an investigation. At the very least, it would put pressure on Thornton to back off." Miranda stopped pacing. "That way station is 20 miles from here. Even if we rode through the night, how would we catch them? They would just deny it." "Not if we had witnesses," Ben said. "There is a federal marshal passing through Yankton this week. I heard about it when I was at the saloon. If we could get him to the way station at the right time, see what is happening with his own eyes, that would carry weight. It was risky, but it was better than running or waiting to be burned out of her home." Miranda looked at Ben, at the determination in his face and the way he stood there, ready to put himself in danger for someone he barely knew. Something warm unfurled in her chest, something that felt like hope mixed with another emotion she was afraid to name. "All right," she said. "We go tonight." Ben nodded. "We will need to be smart about this. Thornton has eyes everywhere. We should leave separately, meet up outside of town." She went to the back room and changed into riding clothes, practical trousers, and a shirt she kept for emergencies. She strapped on her father's old revolver, checked that it was loaded, and grabbed a canteen and some dried meat from the store's supplies. When she emerged, Ben was waiting by the door, his own rifle slung over his shoulder. "There is an old oak tree about a mile north on the Yankton Road," he said. "Meet me there in an hour. That will give us time to make sure we are not being followed." She nodded, and he slipped out the door into the gathering darkness. Miranda watched him mount his horse and ride off at an easy pace, nothing to draw attention. She waited, her nerves stretched tight, then went upstairs to her living quarters to gather a few more supplies. The rooms above the store were modest but comfortable, filled with furniture her parents had brought from Pennsylvania when they first came west. She looked around at the life she had built here, wondering if she would ever see it again. Then she shook off the maudlin thoughts and focused on practical matters. She wrote a quick note to her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, asking her to watch the store for a few days, claiming a family emergency. It was not exactly a lie. An hour later, she slipped out the back door and made her way to the livery stable where she kept her horse, a sturdy mare named Daisy. The stable hand, a teenager named Tommy, helped her saddle up without asking questions. She paid him extra to keep quiet about her departure, and he nodded eagerly, pocketing the coins. The ride out of town felt eternal, every shadow a potential threat, every sound making her jump. But she made it to the oak tree without incident, and Ben was waiting there, his horse rested enough to continue. In the moonlight, his face looked carved from stone, all sharp angles and determination. "Any trouble?" he asked. "No, I think we are clear. Let us ride." They set off at a steady pace, not pushing the horses too hard but moving with purpose. The Dakota night was cool, the sky vast and filled with stars. Miranda had ridden these roads many times, but never under circumstances like these. She was acutely aware of Ben riding beside her, the creak of leather and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats the only sounds between them. After an hour of riding, Ben spoke. "Tell me about your father." The question surprised her. "Why?" "Because we have a long night ahead, and I want to know more about the woman I am riding into danger with." She smiled despite herself. He was a good man, honest, hardworking. He believed that people deserved a fair shake, no matter where they came from or how much money they had. When we came to Sioux Falls in '76, there was not much here, just a few buildings and a lot of hope. He built that store from nothing, and he taught me everything he knew about running a business. How did he die? Pneumonia, 2 winters ago. It came on fast, and by the time the doctor could get to him, it was too late. She paused, remembering those terrible days. He made me promise I would keep the store running, that I would not let anyone push me around just because I was a woman alone. "He would be proud of you," Ben said quietly. "Standing up to Thornton takes more courage than most men I know possess." "What about you?" she asked. "Why did you come to Dakota?" He was quiet for a moment, and she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I grew up in Texas on a small ranch my father ran. When he died, my older brother inherited it. He made it clear there was no place for me there, so I started drifting north, picking up work where I could. I have been at the Morrison place for about a year now. Do you like it there? The work is good, and Morrison treats his hands fair. But it is not mine, you know. I have been saving money, thinking maybe I could start my own place someday. Buy some land, run a small herd, build something that belongs to me. She heard the longing in his voice and understood it. They were not so different, she and this cowboy. Both of them trying to carve out a life in a hard land. Both of them refusing to be pushed around by men with more power and fewer scruples. They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Miranda found herself relaxing despite the danger. There was something steady about Ben, something that made her feel safer than she had in months. She caught herself glancing at him, noticing the way he sat his horse, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, watching for threats. Around midnight, they stopped to rest the horses and eat some of the dried meat she had brought. They found a small creek and let the animals drink while they sat on a fallen log, sharing the canteen. "What will you do if we succeed?" Ben asked. "If we manage to expose Thornton and stop his land grab, I will keep running my store," she said. "Keep trying to help the homesteaders in whatever way I can. What about you?" "I suppose that depends on whether Morrison keeps me on after I have gone behind his back like this," Ben said with a wry smile. "He might not appreciate me involving myself in something he has been trying to stay out of." "You could find work somewhere else," Miranda said. "A man with your skills would not stay unemployed for long." "Maybe." He looked at her, and in the moonlight his eyes were dark and intent. "Or maybe I would stick around Sioux Falls, see if there are other opportunities in the area." Her heart did a small flip at the implication. "The town could always use good men," she said softly. "And what about good women?" he asked. "Does the town appreciate what it has in you?" She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I do my best to be useful." "You are more than useful, Miranda." It was the first time he had used her given name, and it sent a shiver through her. "You are brave and smart and willing to stand up for what is right, even when it puts you in danger. That is rare." She did not know what to say. The moment stretched between them, charged with something electric. Then Ben stood and offered her his hand. "We should keep moving. We have another 10 miles to cover." She took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. When she was on her feet, they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. Then he released her hand and turned back to the horses. They mounted up and continued their ride, but something had shifted between them. The silence now was weighted with possibility, with the awareness of two people drawn to each other despite impossible circumstances. The way station came into view as the eastern sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. It was a squat building made of rough timber, with a stable attached and a corral for changing out the stage horses. Smoke rose from the chimney, indicating someone was already awake. Ben led them to a small rise about a quarter-mile from the station, where they could observe without being seen. They dismounted and secured the horses, then crept closer on foot, using the scrub brush and rocks for cover. "The morning stage from Yankton should arrive in about an hour," Ben whispered. "That is when they will sort the mail and when they will do their dirty work." "How do you know the schedule?" "I used to work as a stage driver before I took the job at Morrison's ranch. I know how these stations operate." They settled in to wait, and Miranda found herself shivering in the cool morning air. Ben noticed and moved closer, sharing his body heat. She leaned into him, grateful for the warmth and the solid presence beside her. "Are you scared?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she admitted, "but not enough to turn back." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just remember, if things go wrong, you ride hard for Yankton. Do not wait for me." "I am not leaving you behind," she said firmly. He looked at her, and she saw something fierce and protective in his expression. "Miranda, if something happens to me, I need to know you will be safe. Promise me." She wanted to argue, but the intensity in his eyes stopped her. "I promise." "But you have to promise me the same thing. If things go bad, you do not try to be a hero. We both get out or neither of us does. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. You drive a hard bargain, Miss Preston. I learned from the best, she said, thinking of her father. They waited as the sky grew lighter, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. Miranda had seen countless sunrises, but this one felt different, charged with significance. She was acutely aware of every detail. The way the wind rustled through the dry grass, the call of a hawk circling overhead, the rhythm of Ben's breathing beside her. The stage arrived right on schedule, the driver calling out to the horses as he brought the coach to a stop. 2 passengers climbed out, stretching their legs, while the station master, a thin man with a prominent belly, began unhitching the team. A younger man, probably his assistant, emerged from the building carrying a mail bag. Ben tensed beside her. That is Johnson, the station master. He is one of Thornton's men. Watch. They observed as Johnson carried the mailbag inside. The passengers went in to get breakfast, and the driver led the tired horses to the stable. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then Johnson appeared at the window, and even from their distance, Miranda could see he was holding up letters to the light, examining the handwriting on the envelopes. He is sorting them, Ben whispered. Looking for yours. Miranda felt anger burn in her chest. The violation of it, the casual way this man was invading her privacy and putting her in danger, made her want to storm down there and confront him. But she forced herself to stay still, to wait. Johnson disappeared from the window, and they could see movement inside through the gaps in the walls. Then he emerged with several letters in his hand and walked toward the stable. Instead of going inside, he circled around to the back, where a man was waiting in the shadows. Thornton's enforcer, Ben breathed. That is Jack Reeves. He is the one who does the dirty work, burning out homesteaders, beating up anyone who stands against Thornton. Reeves was a large man, built like a bull, with a battered hat pulled low over his face. He took the letters from Johnson, flipped through them, then pulled out a knife and slit them open one by one. He read quickly, his lips moving, then tucked several into his coat pocket and handed the others back to Johnson. He is taking the ones he thinks are important, Miranda whispered. The ones that mention Thornton by name or have evidence. And Johnson will reseal the others and send them on, so you would not realize the extent of what was happening, Ben said. It is clever, devious, but clever. They watched as the transaction completed, Reeves passing Johnson what looked like money. Then Reeves mounted a horse that had been waiting behind the stable and rode off toward the south, probably heading back to Thornton's ranch. We need proof, Miranda said. Something we can show to the marshal. Ben nodded. Johnson kept those open letters inside. If we could get our hands on them, see what he has been doing, that would be evidence. But we need to move fast. The stage will be leaving soon. They crept back to their horses and circled around to approach the station from the road, making it look like they were just travelers passing through. As they rode up, Johnson was outside, supervising the hitching of fresh horses to the stage. Morning, Ben called out pleasantly. We are heading to Yankton, hoping to get some breakfast before we continue. Johnson looked at them with sharp, suspicious eyes. We got beans and coffee inside. Stage is leaving in 10 minutes if you want to ride along. We are on horseback, but thank you kindly, Ben said, dismounting. He helped Miranda down, his hand lingering on her waist for just a moment. They went inside, where the 2 stage passengers were finishing their meal. The station master's wife, a tired-looking woman with gray hair, served them plates of beans and cornbread. Miranda forced herself to eat, though her stomach was tight with nerves. Ben excused himself and walked toward the back of the building, claiming he needed the outhouse. Miranda knew he was actually looking for the letters, and she kept up a stream of pleasant conversation with the station master's wife to provide cover. "Have you been running this station long?" Miranda asked. "5 years come October," the woman said. "It is hard work, but honest." Miranda wondered if the woman knew what her husband was doing. Probably not. Most people were good at keeping secrets from the ones they loved. Ben returned a few minutes later, his face carefully neutral. He caught Miranda's eye and gave the slightest nod. He had found something. They finished their meal and paid, then walked back outside. Johnson was nowhere to be seen, probably inside sorting the rest of the mail. The stage driver was securing the luggage on top of the coach. "We need to go," Ben said quietly. "Now." They mounted up and rode away at a casual pace until they were out of sight of the station. Then, Ben reached into his coat and pulled out several letters, including one Miranda recognized as her own handwriting. "He had them in a drawer in the back room," Ben said. "Already opened, just like we saw. Some of them have notes in the margins, probably Thornton's handwriting, marking the passages he found interesting." Miranda took her letter and opened it, feeling violated all over again as she read her own words. She had written to her cousin about specific incidents. The homesteader family that was burned out near Del Rapids, the cattle that were poisoned belonging to a rancher who would not sell to Thornton, the bribes paid to local officials. All of it documented in her neat handwriting, and all of it now in Thornton's hands. "This is enough," she said. "This is proof of what they have been doing. Now we just need to get it to the marshal," Ben said. "Yankton is another 15 miles. If we push hard, we can be there by noon." They rode fast, switching to a ground-eating canter that ate up the miles. The horses were tired, but they sensed the urgency and gave everything they had. Miranda's thighs burned from gripping the saddle and her back ached, but she pushed through the discomfort. As they rode, Ben told her what he knew about the marshal. "His name is William Tucker. He has a reputation for being honest, which is why he has not been in Dakota territory long. The corrupt officials do not like him. But if we can get to him before Thornton hears about what we have done, we might have a chance. Thornton will know we took the letters as soon as Johnson realizes they are missing," Miranda said, "which gives us maybe an hour head start," Ben agreed. "We need to use it." They pushed on, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Miranda's mouth was dry, and her muscles screamed in protest, but she did not slow down. Beside her, Ben rode with grim determination, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for pursuit. Yankton came into view just as the sun reached its zenith. The town was larger than Sioux Falls, a proper territorial capital with brick buildings and wide streets. Ben led them straight to the marshal's office, and they half fell from their horses, legs shaking from exhaustion. Inside, they found Marshal Tucker sitting at his desk, a middle-aged man with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He looked up as they burst in, his hand automatically moving toward the gun at his hip. "Marshal Tucker," Ben said, breathing hard, "we need your help. We have evidence of mail tampering and land fraud." Tucker's eyes sharpened. "Explain, quickly." They poured out the story, showing him the letters and explaining what they had witnessed at the way station. Tucker listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "Silas Thornton," he said when they finished. "I have heard his name before. There have been complaints, but never enough evidence to act on. This, though," he tapped the letters. "This is federal. Tampering with the mail is a serious crime." "He is planning to burn out Miss Preston tonight," Ben said. "Or he was, before we took these letters. Now I do not know what he will do, but I know he will not take this lying down." Tucker stood. "I will need you both to make formal statements." Then I am going to arrest Johnson at that way station and start building a case against Thornton. This is exactly what I have been waiting for." Relief flooded through Miranda, so intense she had to sit down. Ben's hand found her shoulder, steadying her. They spent the next hour giving detailed statements, recounting everything they had seen and heard. Tucker wrote it all down in careful script, asking clarifying questions. When they were finished, he called in several deputies and gave them orders to ride out to the way station and arrest Johnson. "What about Thornton?" Miranda asked. "He is the one behind all of this." "I will deal with Thornton," Tucker said, "but I need to build the case carefully. Men like him have lawyers and political connections. I need to make sure everything is airtight before I move against him directly." "In the meantime, he could come after Miranda," Ben said. Tucker nodded. "Which is why I am going to send a couple of deputies back to Sioux Falls with you. They will make sure Miss Preston is protected while we build the case." It was not perfect, but it was better than nothing. Miranda felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. Tucker looked at Ben. "You did a brave thing, son, speaking up when you saw something wrong. Too many people look the other way." "I could not let an innocent woman be hurt," Ben said simply. Tucker's eyes moved between them, and Miranda saw a knowing look on his face. "You two should get some rest before you head back. There is a hotel down the street, clean beds and decent food." They thanked him and stepped out into the afternoon sunshine. Miranda felt like she had been awake for days, and every muscle in her body ached. Beside her, Ben looked equally exhausted. "Come on," he said gently. "Let us get you somewhere you can rest." The hotel was called the Territorial House, and it was the nicest building Miranda had seen in months. The lobby had actual carpet and a crystal chandelier. Ben arranged for 2 rooms and they climbed the stairs together. At Miranda's door they paused. The hallway was empty, the only sound the creak of the building settling. "Thank you," Miranda said, "for everything. You saved my life." "We saved each other," Ben said. "You were the one who had the courage to stand up to Thornton in the first place." She looked up at him, at the strong planes of his face and the warmth in his eyes. All the fear and adrenaline of the past day crystallized into one clear thought. She did not want to say goodbye to this man. Not now, not ever. "Ben," she said softly. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "Miranda." The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a demand. But when she responded, when her arms came up to wrap around his neck, it deepened into something fierce and claiming. She felt the exhaustion fall away, replaced by a different kind of need. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ben rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the moment I saw you standing in that street," he admitted. "I am glad you finally did," she whispered. He smiled, that rare, transforming smile. "Get some rest. We will talk when we wake up." She nodded and slipped into her room, though every part of her wanted to pull him in with her. But she knew they both needed sleep, and there would be time later for more. The bed was soft, a luxury after the hard ground and long hours in the saddle. Miranda stripped off her dusty clothes and washed at the basin, then fell into bed and was asleep almost instantly. She woke to darkness outside the window and a soft knock on her door. For a moment, she was disoriented, reaching for the gun she had left on the bedside table. Then Ben's voice came through the wood. "Miranda, are you awake?" She wrapped a blanket around herself and opened the door. He had cleaned up, shaved, and changed into fresh clothes. He looked good enough to make her heart skip. "I thought we could get some dinner," he said, his eyes warm as they took her in. "If you are hungry—" "Starving," she admitted. "Give me a few minutes to make myself presentable." She closed the door and dressed quickly, pulling on the spare dress she had brought in her saddlebag. It was nothing fancy, just a simple blue cotton dress, but it was clean. She pinned up her hair, wishing for a moment that she had something prettier to wear. Then she laughed at herself. This was a man who had ridden through the night to save her. He was not going to care what dress she wore. When she emerged, the look in his eyes told her she had been right. They ate in the hotel dining room, a meal of roast beef and potatoes that tasted like heaven after the trail, food, and stress. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their childhoods, their hopes for the future, the little details that made up a life. "I always wanted to see the ocean," Miranda confessed. "My father used to tell stories about sailing from Europe when he was young. It sounded magical." "I have seen it," Ben said. "Went to Galveston once when I was a kid. It is big, bigger than you can imagine. Makes you feel small and free at the same time." "Maybe someday I will get there," she said wistfully. "Maybe we both will," Ben said, his eyes meeting hers across the table. The implication hung in the air between them. We, together, a future beyond just surviving the present crisis. After dinner, they walked through the town, enjoying the cooler evening air. Ben took her hand, and Miranda marveled at how natural it felt, how right. They had known each other for such a short time, and yet it felt like something deeper, something that had been waiting to happen. "What will you do?" Ben asked. "When this is all over, will you stay in Sioux Falls?" "I do not know," Miranda admitted. "Part of me wants to keep fighting to make sure Thornton and men like him do not win. But another part of me is tired of fighting. I would like to just live, run my store, be part of the community without always looking over my shoulder." "You deserve that," Ben said. "You deserve peace." "What about you? You said you wanted your own land, your own ranch." He was quiet for a moment. "I do. But lately, I have been thinking that maybe what I really want is not just land, but a home. A place where I belong, where I am not just passing through, and maybe someone to build that home with." Her heart hammered. "That sounds nice." He stopped walking and turned to face her. The street was quiet, most people already inside for the night. A few lamps glowed in windows, casting soft light. "Miranda, I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. But when I heard what Thornton was planning, when I thought about what could happen to you, I could not stand it. I rode through the night because the idea of you being hurt was unbearable. And now, after everything we have been through, I cannot imagine just walking away from you." She felt tears prick her eyes. "I do not want you to walk away." "Then let me court you properly," he said. "Let me take you to church socials and dinners. Let me show you that I am serious about this, about us." "Yes," she said, not even having to think about it. "Yes, Ben." He kissed her again, right there on the street, and she did not care who might see. When they finally broke apart, they were both smiling. They spent another night in Yankton, though this time in separate rooms and with considerably less stress. In the morning, Marshal Tucker met them at the hotel with news. "We arrested Johnson last night," he said. "He is singing like a canary, trying to make a deal. He has given us enough information to move against Thornton. I am riding to Sioux Falls this afternoon with a warrant for his arrest." "What about the land he has already taken?" Miranda asked. "That will be harder to undo," Tucker admitted. "But at least we can stop him from taking more. And some of those families might be able to get their property back through the courts, now that we have evidence of fraud." It was not perfect justice, but it was something. Miranda felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They rode back to Sioux Falls with an escort of deputies, taking their time and letting the horses recover from their hard ride. Ben stayed close to Miranda the whole way, and they talked about the future in careful, hopeful terms. When they reached Sioux Falls, the town was buzzing with news. Word had already spread about Johnson's arrest and the coming action against Thornton. People stopped Miranda on the street to shake her hand, to thank her for standing up to the cattle baron. Mrs. Henderson, her neighbor, hugged her tightly. "We were so worried about you, dear. When we saw you rode out in the night, we feared the worst." "I am fine," Miranda assured her. "Better than fine." She reopened the store and business was brisk. People wanted to hear the story firsthand, and they wanted to support her however they could. Ben helped out, stocking shelves and talking to customers, and Miranda found she liked having him there. He fit into her life seamlessly, as if he had always been meant to be there. Marshal Tucker arrested Thornton 3 days later. The cattle baron tried to bluster and threaten, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was taken to Yankton to await trial, and his enforcer, Jack Reeves, was arrested shortly after trying to flee to Montana. Ben stayed in Sioux Falls, taking a job at the livery stable while he looked for land to buy. He and Miranda were seen together constantly, at church on Sundays, at town gatherings, walking through the streets in the evening. The town approved of the match, pleased to see their brave storekeeper find happiness with the cowboy who had saved her. As autumn turned to winter, Ben found a piece of land about 5 miles north of town. It was not much, just 80 acres with a small creek running through it, but it had potential. He started building a cabin, working on it every free moment he had. Miranda rode out to visit him on Sundays, bringing food and helping however she could. One cold November afternoon, as they sat by the fire in the half-finished cabin, Ben took her hand. "I know we have not been courting long," he said. "But I am 26 years old, and I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I want to build this ranch, but more than that, I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me, Miranda?" She did not hesitate. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in the Sioux Falls church on a snowy December day in 1882. Half the town turned out for the ceremony, eager to celebrate the couple who had become local heroes. Miranda wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew, and Ben wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous as he waited at the altar, when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Ben kissed her. The congregation burst into applause. It felt like a new beginning, not just for them but for the whole community that had suffered under Thornton's rule. They spent their wedding night at the hotel in Yankton, the same one where they had stayed after their desperate ride. This time, there was no fear, no urgency, just the slow discovery of each other and the promise of all the nights to come. In the spring, they moved into the completed cabin on Ben's land. Miranda kept running the store, riding into town 3 days a week while Ben worked the ranch. It was hard work, but it was theirs. They built it together, day by day, season by season. Thornton was convicted in February of 1883 and sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His empire crumbled, and much of the land he had stolen was returned to its rightful owners. The homesteaders began to thrive again, no longer living in fear. Miranda's letters to her cousin resumed, but this time she wrote about happier things. She wrote about her marriage, about the ranch they were building, about the community that was healing. And she never had to worry about those letters being intercepted again. Their first child, a son they named James after Miranda's father, was born in the autumn of 1884. Ben was beside himself with joy, holding the tiny baby with a mixture of terror and wonder. Miranda watched him and knew she had chosen the right man, the right life. More children followed. A daughter named Sarah in 1886, and another son, Thomas, in 1888. The cabin grew to accommodate their expanding family, and the ranch prospered. Ben turned out to have a gift for breeding horses, and soon people were coming from all over Dakota Territory to buy from the Parker Ranch. Miranda eventually sold the store in town to focus on the ranch and their growing family, though she stayed involved in community affairs. She helped establish a proper school in Sioux Falls and served on the town council, still fighting for the things she believed in, just in different ways. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ben surprised her with a trip. They left the children with Mrs. Henderson, who had become like a grandmother to them, and took the train east. Their destination, the Atlantic Ocean. Miranda stood on the beach in New Jersey, holding Ben's hand, and watched the waves crash against the shore. It was everything her father had described and more. The vastness, the power, the endless horizon. "Thank you," she said, looking up at her husband. The years had added some gray to his hair and lines around his eyes, but he was still the same man who had ridden through the night to save her. "For giving me this. For giving you the ocean." He asked with a smile. "For giving me everything," she said. "For choosing me, for building this life with me, for being exactly who you are." He kissed her, tasting of salt spray and promises kept. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every hard mile, every struggle, because it led me to you." They stayed on the beach until sunset, watching the sky turn crimson and gold. Then they walked back to their hotel hand in hand, talking about their children and the ranch and all the years still ahead of them. When they returned to Sioux Falls, their children ran to greet them, and Miranda scooped them up, breathing in the sweet smell of their hair. This was her life now, so different from what she had imagined as a young woman running a store alone, better than she had imagined. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythm of seasons and the milestones of family life. The children grew, the ranch expanded, and Miranda and Ben grew old together. They never forgot those desperate days when her letters were intercepted, when he rode through the night to warn her, when they first realized that they belonged together. Those days had tested them, shaped them, brought them together. And every anniversary, Ben would take Miranda in his arms and say, "I would ride through 1,000 nights to keep you safe." And she would smile and kiss him and know, deep in her bones, that he meant every word. By 1910, they were grandparents, with James married and running his own spread nearby, Sarah teaching school in town, and Thomas working the family ranch with his father. Miranda was 51 years old, her hair streaked with silver, but her eyes still held the same determination that had made her stand up to a cattle baron all those years ago. She and Ben sat on the porch of their home one summer evening, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Giving up the store, the independent life you had?" She looked at him, at the strong profile that she had memorized long ago, at the way the fading light caught in his hair. "Never," she said firmly. "I did not give anything up. I chose you, chose this life, and it has been the best choice I ever made. Even with all the hard times, the drought in '91, the years when money was tight, especially then," she said, "because we faced it all together. You and me, Ben, always you and me." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Miranda Preston Parker. I loved you from the moment I saw you standing in that street, looking scared but determined. I loved you when we rode through the night together. I loved you on our wedding day and when each of our children was born and every single day in between." She felt tears on her cheeks, but they were good tears, the kind that came from a heart too full to contain all the emotion. "I love you too, more than words can say." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out one by one, the same stars that had watched over them that desperate night nearly 30 years ago. The night that had changed everything. The night that had brought them together. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family. Sarah had brought the grandchildren for a visit, and their laughter echoed through the rooms. It was the sound of life, of continuity, of a legacy built on courage and love. Miranda leaned her head on Ben's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. They had built something real here, something that would outlast them. Their children would inherit not just land and buildings, but the knowledge that love was worth fighting for, that standing up for what was right mattered, that two people who chose each other could create something beautiful from even the darkest circumstances. As the night deepened, they finally went inside, where Sarah was putting the children to bed and Thomas was helping his wife clean up from dinner. This was their reward for all those hard years. A family gathered under one roof, safe and loved and whole. Miranda and Ben climbed the stairs to their bedroom, still holding hands. The room was the same one they had shared for nearly 28 years, filled with memories and the accumulated treasures of a life well lived. Photographs of their children lined the dresser. A quilt made by Miranda's hands covered the bed. Ben's best hat hung on the bedpost, worn but cherished. They prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of long marriage, each knowing where the other would be, what they would do next. When they finally slid under the covers, Ben pulled Miranda close and she nestled against him with a sigh of contentment. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured into her hair. "About how lucky I am," she said. "About how that terrible night when I discovered my letters had been intercepted turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, because it brought you to me." "I was already yours," he said. "I just did not know it yet. The moment I heard you were in danger, everything became clear. You were mine to protect, mine to love, mine to build a life with. I just had to make you see it too." She turned in his arms to face him, her hand coming up to cup his cheek. "I saw it, Ben. Maybe not right away, but I saw it. I saw you, really saw you, and I knew you were the one I had been waiting for." He kissed her, slow and sweet, a kiss that spoke of enduring love rather than desperate passion, though there was still passion there even after all these years. "There always would be. Sleep, my love," he whispered. "Tomorrow we will ride out to check the north pasture. Just you and me, like old times." She smiled against his chest. Even now they still found time to ride together, to recapture some of that feeling from those desperate days when it was just the two of them against the world. The years continued to unfold in a pattern of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. They lost Mrs. Henderson in 1912, mourning the woman who had been such a constant in their lives. They celebrated when James gave them their 5th grandchild. They weathered the hard years of the First World War, watching young men from Sioux Falls march off to fight in distant lands. Through it all, they had each other. When Miranda's hair turned completely silver, Ben told her she was more beautiful than ever. When Ben's joints ached from decades of hard work, Miranda rubbed liniment into them and told him stories to distract from the pain. In 1920, when the territory had long since become a state and Sioux Falls had grown into a proper city, they celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party, and half the town showed up. People told stories about the brave storekeeper and the cowboy who had ridden through the night, about how they had taken down a corrupt cattle baron and built an empire of their own. Ben and Miranda listened and laughed, holding hands like newlyweds. When someone asked Ben what the secret to a long marriage was, he looked at his wife and said, "Choose someone worth fighting for, and then never stop choosing them. Every single day, choose them again." Miranda squeezed his hand. "And choose someone who will ride through the night for you," she added. "Who will risk everything to keep you safe." They danced that night, swaying together to music played by their grandchildren. Ben was 71 and Miranda was 61, but in each other's arms, they were young again. They were the desperate fugitives riding through the darkness, the nervous newlyweds on their wedding night, the young parents welcoming their first child. All of those moments lived in them still, woven into the fabric of who they had become. As they drove home that night in their automobile, a modern convenience that still amazed them both, Ben reached over and took Miranda's hand. "Have I told you lately that you are the best thing that ever happened to me?" he asked. She smiled. "Not since this morning." "Then I am falling down on the job," he said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Miranda Parker. You are my heart, my home, my everything." "And you are mine," she said softly. "You always have been, since that night you rode to warn me. You gave me my life back, and then you gave me a life better than I ever dreamed possible." They pulled up to their house, the one they had built and rebuilt and expanded over nearly 4 decades. Lights glowed in the windows, welcoming them home. This was the life they had made, the legacy they would leave behind. Inside, they found Sarah waiting for them. She had stayed to make sure they got home safely, and she fussed over them like they were children. They allowed it, knowing it came from love. After Sarah left, they sat together on the sofa in the parlor, Miranda's head on Ben's shoulder. The house was quiet now, all the guests gone, just the two of them left. "We did good, did we not?" Ben said quietly. "We did very good," Miranda agreed. "We built something real, something that will last. I have no regrets," he said. "Not a single one." "Neither do I," she said. "Except maybe that I did not kiss you sooner that first night," he chuckled. "We made up for lost time." They sat in the comfortable silence of people who did not need to fill every moment with words. They had talked enough over the years, said all the important things. Now they could simply be two souls so intertwined that they moved as one. Eventually they climbed the stairs to bed, taking their time, no longer young but still strong in the ways that mattered. In their room, they prepared for sleep with practiced ease. As Miranda brushed out her silver hair, Ben came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "Still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," he said. She patted his hand. "You old fool, you need spectacles." "My eyes work just fine," he said. "I see you exactly as you are, and you are perfect." She turned in his arms and kissed him. "We are both fools, then, foolish enough to love each other for nearly 40 years. The best kind of fools," he agreed. They climbed into bed, and Miranda nestled into her place against Ben's side, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. It was the position they had slept in for decades, and it still felt like coming home. "Ben," she said softly into the darkness. "Yes, my love." "Thank you for riding through the night for me." "Thank you for being worth it," he replied. She smiled and closed her eyes, drifting off to sleep in the arms of the man who had loved her through everything. The man who had seen her letters intercepted by her enemies and had ridden through the night to warn her. The man who had become her husband, her partner, her home. Outside, the Dakota night was vast and star-filled, the same sky that had watched over them that desperate night in 1882. The same stars that had seen them fall in love, build a life, raise a family, grow old together. And if those stars could speak, they would tell a story of courage and love, of two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to make their own light. They would tell of letters intercepted and desperate rides, of justice served and lives rebuilt. They would tell of a storekeeper and a cowboy who became so much more, who became everything to each other. They would tell the story of Ben and Miranda Parker, and how their love lit up the wild Dakota night and lasted a lifetime and beyond.